Hey everyone. Yeah, well, you know, I didn't expect to have to do this kind of a video, but as a lot of you know, people like myself, Jeff Shiegel, the Sleg Daddy, those at Off the Rope Show, like Mr. Route, Triple T, Metal D, Marvelous Mark, B-Rad, Jeff Meacham, and Rift, Bill Apter, Big Ray, the list could go on of people that are marks, that are fans of the wrestling business, that when you wake up this morning, the last thing you want to hear is the passing of someone you grew up with. I remember in the 1980s when I started getting into wrestling. It was thanks to Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling. But I wasn't into the live action portion of wrestling yet. It took time, and it was thanks to my older sister. But as I got into it in the late 80s and into the 90s, I started to enjoy it. And one character that stuck out to me, and one of the storylines I remember the most as I got introduced to the live action portion of the wrestling, one of the characters that stuck out to me was Dusty Rhodes. In fact, one of the more memorable storylines I remember when I first started getting into the live action portion of it was his feud with the $1 Million Man, and how it introduced us to Dustin Rhodes, aka Goldust. And as I watched since then, I watched Dusty be there when The Undertaker made his debut and become the phenomenon that he became. But after a while, like any other fans, Dusty wasn't with the WWE after 1991. After the Royal Rumble of that year or so, he was gone. Now, some people say that he, along with Dustin, went to Japan before they both arrived into WCW. Well, Dustin got a huge break. Dustin became a United States champion, became a tag team champion, I think even became television champion. And his father was working as a color commentator as well as behind the scenes as a booker, doing what was best for business and giving people what they really wanted. As time went on, Dusty would make one last, as far as I know, a few last major in-ring appearances with WCW in the early to mid 90s. One of them was with his son at Clash of the Champions, an event that I recorded on VHS, but unfortunately left in the Midwest. But I remember watching this, and this was at a time when Hulk Hogan had just come into WCW, and there was still remnants of the WCW that was there before him. So, basically, I remember watching Pro. I remember Dusty came out and made that passionate speech to his son about, look, you don't need a partner, you've got one right here. I remember that. And I remember specifically that led into the match at Clash of the Champions, as well as led into the War Games match the following month. Now, did Dusty stay around after that? Was he on screen? I can't really remember, but I think he made a few more appearances to support his son and the Nasty Boys. It was after that he disappeared for a while. I'm assuming went into retirement. Hold on for a sec. I don't know who that is. But like I said, I'm assuming he went into retirement. Kind of relaxed a little bit. But also still stayed backstage at WCW as a booker. He still stayed backstage. Like I said, he sort of went into semi-retirement, but still remained as a booker. Because I do remember him being mostly on commentary after the situation with Dustin, and then Dustin left. I remember, like I said, him being on commentary most of the time. I remember him being one of the supporters of WCW for a while until we got to 1999 Sold Out. Or was it 1998? I can't really remember. It's 98 or 99. I think it was 98. Yeah, it was 98 is what it was. I remember. And he ended up doing something that no fan thought he would do. Not only did he turn heel, sort of a coolish heel, if you will, but he ended up joining the NWO. The one last person, storyline-wise, of traditional wrestling joining a rebellious faction. Of course, that didn't last long because Dusty, I guess, left the company about a year or so later, or a few months later. The next thing we knew about Dusty, like I said, it seemed he went into semi-retirement until I'm guessing he got a call from Paul Heyman to come up to ECW and work with old school Steve Corino, who you now know as King Corino, color commentator at Ring of Honor. So Dusty made an appearance there, had a few matches with Steve Corino and I think his associates. Then went back to WCW about a year or so later, where he got involved in a storyline with Ric Flair and Jeff Jarrett and his son Dustin, which led to their tag match at the final WCW pay-per-view Greed. And for Dusty Rhodes to be part of the first, in a sense, WCW pay-per-view back in 1983, when WCW was back then known as the NWA, before it became NWA WCW, if you get my drift. It sort of was a full circle kind of deal for him, because he was there when they went on pay-per-view with Starrcade 83, and he was there at the end with Greed 2001. So it was sort of a full circle deal. Now, after a while, Dusty seemingly disappeared, was out of the picture. But in a sense, it seemed like WWE had given him a job, not only training talent, but helping creatively. And Dusty wasn't involved in many things, not for a while. It wasn't until about 2006, Dusty, as far as I know, had 2005 and 2006, Dusty started to get more involved on screen. Especially when he teamed up with Ric Flair, Ron Simmons, and Sergeant Slaughter at the Survivor Series. So, Dusty has had his moments. And in the past couple of years, especially when involving the Authority and his sons, they've had their moments. He has had some great moments. In fact, some people will always recall that verbal confrontation he had with Stephanie, and that he went off script, if you will, when he did this to Stephanie. He put his hand up in front of her, and I'm guessing Stephanie, looking back at it now, even though it upset her then, I'm sure looking back at it now, Stephanie realizes that that's just him saying, hey, look, if you don't know much about the business, even though you grew up in it, don't say things you don't know. So, yeah, it was, he had some great moments, helping his sons regain their jobs, if you will, in that match that they had with the Shield. Just unbelievable moments. But then comes days like today. Then comes days like today where you wake up and the last thing you want to hear is Dusty Rhodes, the American dream, has passed away. That's the last thing you want to hear. I mean, it's hard enough of that last year. I grew up on The Ultimate Warrior, and it was hard for me to find out that last year he passed away 2 days after WrestleMania. A day after he made his first appearance on Raw in about, what was it, almost 20 years, 18 years. And it would be his last one for good. But then to wake up and hear about this today, it's hard. Like I said, for everybody that I mentioned at the beginning, it's hard for a lot of us. Because even though many of us didn't grow up with Dusty from when he first began in the late 60s until he finally stepped away from the ring full time, we still grew up with him in a majority of the way from the 80s, 90s, and even the 2000s, and we still got to experience it. We still got to experience why everybody, when they would talk about Dusty Rhodes and say, you need to watch this guy, you need to pay attention to this guy, you need to watch his classic matches, his promos. At first we wouldn't understand until we watched those. And we then understood why people had respect for him, why people were fans of him, why the place erupted every time he stepped out. Every time he stepped out into the arena, the place erupted. And why everybody would be silent when he would speak. So it's hard to hear about that. It's hard to hear that this man, this legend, is no longer with us. And to find out that his cause of death wasn't a natural one, but was due to some kind of fall, I don't know much of the details yet. It's still hard to swallow, still hard to comprehend. Especially at a time when recently you just had him involved in a storyline with his sons, and you had his son Cody as Stardust say that Dusty Rhodes was dead to him. And I'm sure looking back on that now, Cody's wishing he never had to be told to say that. And I'm pretty sure now, out of respect and honor to Dusty Rhodes, if the WWE has any of it, that they're going to get rid of this Stardust character, and they're going to let Cody Rhodes reemerge, and they're going to give Cody Rhodes that push he deserves, that Dusty felt he has deserved since day one. But it's still hard to comprehend. It's still hard to accept. But they say that life goes on, and it does. But for all of us as wrestling fans, we will always have the memories of the American dream. We will always have the memories of him being who he is, being the dream, living the dream. Showing that even though you don't have to have the greatest physique in the world, that you can always be something. You can live your dreams. You can be a champion. And as he says, he's wined and dines with kings and queens. Well, he's wine and dining with kings and queens right now up in the heavens above. So Dusty, thank you for all the memories. You'll be truly missed. And thank you for letting all of us, thank you for letting all of us, as your fans, live the American dream. Godspeed, Dusty. You will truly be missed.